see. I got Tom had popped a question earlier that I did want to cover. So Tom, I appreciate you sharing that. Have you have you discussed the Oahu homes slipping into the ocean? Well, I believe it's home that was on the North Shore. So there was a story, and I don't have a graphic. Tom, if you have a link to a page, can you pop it in the comments? I'll try to bring it up on the screen to give people a visual. I do not have an image prepared. But look, so there was a story, and I think a lot of folks were posting this. I think Kenai, if I'm not mistaken, you posted a link to this, the story or this picture on the private Islander Ohana Facebook group. So there was a home on the North Shore that made the headlines for a couple days, where the home, basically fell into the ocean. It was like right on the shore, and there's sand, and the crashing waves, and the home kind of fell in. And so that caught a couple of headlines. So look, here's the bottom line on this, is that if you look at the island chain on a map with Kauai on the uppermost left-hand side. Actually, if you look at the entire Hawaiian chain, it spans really long. I believe Midway Island, if I'm not mistaken, is the northwesternmost, considered still a Hawaiian island. If you look at that entire chain of island, you'll see a very clear trend, which is the islands on the lower right, the most southeast, which is the Big Island, are the biggest, and the ones in the upper left-hand corner, the northwest, are the smallest. And that they weren't born that way. They changed that way. They all were once as big, probably, as the Big Island, but they all shrunk over time. And that wasn't because of climate change. That was because erosion, right? It's a fact of life. Island grows. Volcanic eruptions kind of grow the island, like the Big Island, still growing. They grow. And then, a long story, I don't want to get into the science of it. The volcanoes stop, because the islands actually move. There's like plate tectonics. Actually, the islands are moving to the northwest like an inch every 1,000 years, whatever the number is. Islands are moving to the northwest. And so after a while, they're off of this little hot spot where the volcano pops up, and so they move off, and the volcano stop, like on Oahu, for example. In Maui, the volcano stop. And as soon as the volcano stops, as soon as the island stops growing, it starts shrinking. So it shrinks. Island shrinks. And because it shrinks, well, if your home is on the edge, which a lot of these homes are, they're on the edge, island shrinks. Sooner or later, you got no more island. Boom, it falls. So that's the long and short. There's a whole kinds of issues they've been trying to kind of, there's all kinds of legislation. You're not supposed to, for example, you're not supposed to go in. There's the link. Thank you, Tom. And you know what? I can't click on that link. Darn it. I'll leave that link up in case you want to type in that long link. Unfortunately, I thought, Tom, I apologize. You got that link for me, and I appreciate it, and I can't open the link, unfortunately. Anyway, there's been all kinds of legislation. You guys want to kind of chime in on this, and maybe what's going on in Maui and the Big Island and Oahu? There's laws. You cannot build seawalls. They don't want people building up seawalls, and I believe that's good reason. And so these people, they've tried other approaches, like growing plants and trying to grow, sort of things that are going to stop the encroachment, but you can't stop the shrinking of the islands. You can't, the Big Island, one of these, in a zillion years, the Big Island will be the size of Kauai. And there's no amount of seawalls that you can do that's going to stop that. So when the big storms come, like the ones we just had, it chunks away at the beach. And it's a fact of life. Let's get some commentary clockwise. Dylan, then Scott, then Heidi. Anything you want to share about on sort of ocean homes falling into the ocean? It's not a problem yet on the Big Island, Dylan, but what's your take on all this?
Simple. Don't buy a house on the water, and you don't have to worry about it.
This is why Polynesians built their homes up in the mountains. This is why beachfront property was the least valuable property of all. They used to bury their dead. Then us Howleys come and we want to live on the beach. Scott?
So it's interesting. I sold a couple of actually record-breaking oceanfront lots on the North Shore, and I had a client on one of those who had access to satellite imagery going back many years of the coastline up there, and he looked many years ago and up at present time, and there were areas of the North Shore that had almost no erosion, and there were other pockets that had significant erosion, and that area is one of those areas. So we stayed away from that area. I mean, it's going to happen, especially. It was interesting because a lot of the issues started to happen when the north swells were coming in earlier before the beach was replenished. So during the summer, the sand shifts and moves and goes away some. And if you get big swells, 20, 30, 40-foot swells, they come way up and it starts to eat at that land. And it started to happen some years ago. But yeah, I mean, the secret to me is, like you said, eventually they're all going to end up in the ocean. If you want to enjoy it during your lifetime and not be impacted, there are certain pockets that you should focus on.
Yeah, and you just gotta, again, this is where experience comes in. Know where you're buying, and you want someone who's been around that knows the issue. Heidi, has there been any issues of that in Maui? What's the story of sort of people buying on the beach and homes falling into the water? I haven't heard a story about that for a long time.
Well, it's absolutely a big issue. I mean, erosion, sea level rise considerations, and then, I mean, the other thing is if you're buying an oceanfront home and it gets destroyed in a storm or something, you're not necessarily going to be allowed to rebuild it because it might not be in the right setback area. One of the issues on Maui right now is actually in a condominium complex where there's multiple buildings at this oceanfront condominium, and one of the oceanfront buildings was actually evacuated over a year ago because it's basically sitting on top of a seawall and it has structural issues. The condominium complex has applied to the county for permits to repair it, and basically they're saying no. So perhaps these 12 units might need to be relocated or removed permanently. So yeah, I would say it's definitely something that buyers need to know about. I mean, everybody wants to be oceanfront, but I mean, there's also considerations with that.
Yeah. So word of the wise is this has been happening for a million years. It's going to continue happening for the rest of time. You have to be careful about where you're buying. Sea level, and the sea levels have been, if you look at the curve of sea level rise, if you look at the graph, you go back 100,000 years, it's a straight line. It's a straight line of sea level rise. So sea level rise has been happening forever. Interesting. There's interesting controversy on the sea level rise, just to kind of geek off for a moment over here. There's some interesting controversies on the sea level rise. They're not exactly sure whether the sea levels are in fact rising or if the lands are sinking. So at the end of the day, it's still the same, right? Land, the water levels go up, whether you're sinking or whether they're rising. God, who knows? But that's that.